from me. Joy, please don't take the joy away from me. Joy, please don't take the joy away from me. Joy, please don't take the joy away from me. Joy, Joy 99.7 FM.
A very good evening to you here on Joy 99.7 FM. Today is Sunday, the 20th of March, 2022, 1 minute after the hour of 9. Welcome to your favorite Christian infotainment program, A Walk with Jesus, right here on 99.7 megahertz Joy FM. It's still Ghana month, and tonight we want to delve into a very grey but important area and discuss the principles and importance of leadership succession in Ghanaian churches. And then later on, we'll zoom into the challenges of the charismatic and leadership succession. Everything rises and falls on leadership. I'm very sure you know that. Leaders play a critical role in any organization's success or failure. All organizations, including churches, encounter a transition from one leader to another at a point in time. During the Ecclesia Roundtable series in November 2018, organized by the Kingdom Equip Network, the convener, Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Ansah, argued that the mainline churches had not been spared from numerous leadership succession challenges despite their strong transition structures due to disagreement on the selection of a successor. According to him, this disagreement led to court actions, press conferences, and public demonstrations and what have you. One may ask, why a faith-based organization like the church, which is expected to exhibit a high moral and ethical standard as far as leadership is concerned, why do they have to get associated with succession issues? Is it the fear of opposition that hinders the incumbent from getting actively involved in the succession process, or the fear of letting go of power? We'll get to know. Does the unwillingness attitude of the incumbent affect the succession process? We'll get to know. So join us tonight on A Walk with Jesus as we explore whether leadership succession is biblical or not, and the biblical patterns of leadership succession if it is biblical. Later on, we'll focus on the concerns of founding leaders when it comes to the leadership succession, why stakeholders would reject the choice of an incumbent as his or her successor. Is it a matter of the incumbent shielding himself against the situation where they would be abandoned and not be taken care of, leading to the desire to select someone they can trust? And the watchword is trust. Is it a matter of competency and qualification of the potential successor? What should be done to discourage the incumbent leader from acting in his or her interests. What measures can be put in place to ensure that the incumbent leader plans his or her succession and gets involved in the succession process? It's going to be an interesting discussion full of information. And so kindly join us, connect with us via our social media handles. Share your comments with us as far as the topic is concerned via WhatsApp 055 997. That's 055 997. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. We're live on Twitter. Kindly connect with us and share the pages as well. I'm ably supported by my able producer, Michaela Nai. My name is Acquah, and when I come back from the musical break, I will be introducing my resourceful guests for tonight's discussion. This is A Walk with Jesus, and you're warmly welcome.
Let me see your victory signs up like this. Come on, hey! Listen. Yeah, Jesus, I can't one a more. I don't forget to me, say no. Victory is mine, and why is it demo? Yeah, I can know a more. Yeah, Jesus, I can't one a more. Don't forget to me, say no. Victory is mine, and why is it demo? Everybody, come on. Yeah, Jesus, I can't know.
Jesus, I can't know and one evermore.
I don't forget
To me to say no.
victory is mine.
Victory is mine.
Oh, yeah, I can know. Yeah, Jesus, I can't know.
Jesus, I can't know and one evermore.
I don't forget
To me to say no.
victory is mine.
Victory is mine.
Oh, in Kunimo. In Kunimo. I don't forget
To me to say no.
victory is mine.
Victory is mine.
Yeah. Oh, in Kunimo. Yes, we're in Kunimo. I don't forget
To me to say no.
victory is mine.
Victory is mine.
Hey, listen. I am victorious. Victory is my name. I am victorious. Victory is my name. Yeah, I can and want it forevermore. I am victorious. Victory is my name. And everybody say,
I am victorious. Victory is my name.
I am victorious.
I am victorious. Victory is my name.
Yeah, I can
Now I come
and want.
Victory is my
Oh,
name.
in Kunimo. Yes, we're in Kunimo.
Right, if you just tuned in, this is A Walk with Jesus right here on Joy 99.7 FM. You are warmly welcome. My name is Acquah. Tonight, we are discussing leadership succession in Ghanaian churches. And once again, we are blessed to have this great man of God with us on this platform to be of a blessing to us. I'm very sure that there's a lot to learn tonight, especially if you are into ministry. this will be a very, very important learning grounds for you. If you know someone in ministry, your brother, your sister, your relative, your friend who is into ministry, this is going to be a very, very good opportunity for them to learn. So please do well to pick a phone, call them, tell them to tune in, recommend a walk with Jesus to them tonight, and do the listening. We're live on Facebook as well. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Twitter. You can get connected, and please share the link. Share so that friends and loved ones will get connected. My guest tonight is the immediate past president of Full Gospel Church International, and he needs no introduction on this platform. Bishop S.N. Mensah is my guest tonight. Bishop, a very good evening to you once again.
Thank you very much, Pastor.
We thank God. I'm in the spirit, so I picked in the spirit that it's going to be a blue affair tonight.
I totally.
So we're in blue. Thank you so much. Every time that you've had the opportunity to be with us, it's been a great learning grounds, and we don't take it for granted at all. Thank you once again.
Well, I appreciate always coming here because it's a platform where we can share knowledge and impart our society. So thank you very much.
Sure. To begin with, this subject seems to be a gray area, the issue of succession, when it comes to the church. You've had your fair share as far as succession is concerned. I'm interested in your experience with regards to succession. Bishop S.N. Mensah, Full Gospel Church International. You mind sharing your experience with us?
Well, thank you very much. Full Gospel Church International is the first charismatic church in Ghana.
Okay.
And the church was born 2nd February 1978.
I see.
So that makes it the first charismatic church, 44 years now.
Wow.
And that was started by my dad, the Most Reverend Emmanuel Ashon Mensah. And so somewhere in the late 90s, then I took over leadership by the year 2000. But before that, I wrote an application to become a pastor, and that
Even though it was your father's
even though it was my father,
church. Why so?
He asked me, he said, "Look, like any other employment, you just write an application if you want to be employed." So I said, "Church, writing an application, Daddy, doesn't make sense." He said, "You need to write an application." So I wrote an application to become a pastor, and then I went through interview. I was subjected to the interview. Why I want to go into ministry? I mean, he was sitting in chair with other executive council members, and then he was asking me why I want to go into ministry. Was I being persuaded? Was I being forced? Then after that, I was sponsored to Bible school. Then he sent me to various. I got back, and then I became an assistant pastor to learn under the senior pastor. Then, of course, I went through the various mills. At a point, I was transferred to Koforidua. And that was a time nobody was ready to go, Pastor. Nobody was ready to go to Koforidua because at that time the incident there was a little bit hostile and the environment was extremely hostile. And then he transferred me to Koforidua. And my aunties and my mom really persuaded him not to because the signal there wasn't too good. And you know what he told my aunties?
What did he tell them?
He said, "Look, if the place is that hostile and that any pastor being sent there could die, whose son would you want me to send? And whose child would you want me to send? So that person should go and face that threat. That child is also a living child of another person. So I'll send my own."
Throughout this period, did you feel that you were being unfairly treated? Your father being the founder of the church.
I felt like he wasn't being fair to me, because the environment, see, the pastor who was there at that time had done some rebellion attitude, shown some rebellious attitude and other things, and that was going to lead to the break of the church. And for some reason, no matter how he was admonished, he didn't listen, and then he had an accident and died, And so it sent a signal, and then the people in Koforidua probably felt that Tema people caused all this trouble. And so now, if he's going to send someone from Tema, that was going to be a little bit, critical. And that made the environment extremely hostile. That was in 1982, 82, 83. But my dad insisted when all my aunties said, look, don't do this. She said, whose son do you want me to send? I'm going to sacrifice my son. And so he sent me. And I went through all the meals and what have you. And finally, in I became the vice president of the church. I became the head of the Bible school institution. I was one time a pastor secretary. Then later I became the National Executive Council secretary. So literally,
By then you had gone through the mill like any other person would.
any other person, I have to justify my inclusion. So I wasn't, leadership wasn't thrust on me on a silver platter. I had to justify my inclusion. Then in 1998, 99, we had a general council meeting, and I was subjected to re-election, with another person, and I emerged as the winner. Then, of course, I was sworn into office. So in 2000, I took over the leadership of the church, and I have led Full Gospel for 22 years. And therefore, I had to look for a third generation leader. And this journey started in 2015 when I started seriously praying and thinking about a replacement. Because
That's about 7 years
about 7
of
years.
searching
7
for a
years of
successor.
searching for a successor. And at a point, it didn't look like I was going to get one, but I kept teaching and training. And by 2019, at least it had reduced to about 3 possible candidates.
What were the things you were looking out for?
Well, looking out for the essence of someone who can drive the organization with vision, committed to the various structures of the church, looking for loyalty, character, someone who could produce results, someone who could, the ability in solving problems, not people who were full of complaining and trying to murmur and blackmailing and undermining. I mean, you have such, qualities. You have such exhibits, during those period of time. So you are looking for people who have the skill to solve problems, the skill to provide leadership, the character, the values, who could maintain the values and the vision of the church and would be able to multiply the church. And sometimes in leadership, when you give them any assignment, you watch beyond what they are doing. So you listen to their language. And when you find some pastors always complaining, they are not a good material. You find pastors who will probably undermine leadership. He's not a material to provide leadership. You find them when they there are meetings. After the meetings, they hold meetings within the meeting. He's not a material. Okay, but people who can defend the leader in his presence and be behind him. And people who can be able to share their thoughts, but at the same time, come up with other possible solutions. And those who are able to translate the vision on the ground. And so you look at all this, and sometimes you intentionally assign responsibility to other pastors and find out what are they going to do? How are they going to handle? These are things you begin to observe. You observe the way they talk, the way they are able to carry themselves, the way they manage their local churches. All these things inform you. However, you just keep those things to yourself. So these were the things one would look for. And so by 2019, it had narrowed down to about 3 possible candidates. And I think it was 2019 where I sat in the executive council meeting chairing. Then all of a sudden, I gave them a piece of paper. And I said, listen, in case we are supposed to look for a possible candidate who will lead Full Gospel Church International, which of the pastors would you think he's capable? So just write their names. Just write a name for me. It was to test the mindset of my National Executive Council member. So I gave them the paper, and everybody wrote a name. Nobody knew what name has been written. And so I collected the sheet and kept it. Till now I have it. Till now I have what they wrote. So I kept it, I looked at it, and I kept quiet. And that was just to confirm whether those names were part of my narrow 3 possible candidates.
And did their votes reflect?
It reflected
what you were.
It reflected what I was thinking.
Wow.
It reflected what I was thinking. So you see, what I was going through was, then I was doing some consultation. It reflected. Then by June 2020, one midnight around 2 a.m., I woke up from a serious dream. I saw myself handing over a file to one of the pastors. And when I handed over the file, the voice said, "This is the candidate, but the time is not yet up." I woke up, sat down, and I knew beyond every reasonable doubt that God has shown me my next successor. June 2020. But however, the candidate didn't know. And I kept praying and praying and praying throughout. Then in 2021, we had an executive council meeting, I think somewhere around June. And then I had to drop the bombshell. At that point in time, we had written a letter to all the branches and all the pastors to outline our transitional plan. You know, from the middle of 2021 up to 2022, till the date of induction. We have outlined all. You know, by the grace of God, I'm coming from a background, I'm specialized in leadership development, leadership transition, and leadership transition management. So I was able to bring that skill as a leadership succession expert or leadership transition management expert. I was able to bring that skills to FGCI. So by the 21st of June, when we had a meeting and everybody was quiet, it was like if you should drop a pin, you could hear the noise of the pin.
I can
All
imagine.
executive council members, every eye was fixed
Dead
on
silent.
me. And then I told them what informed this decision, what I was looking for. I gave them all the criteria, someone who can sustain the vision, the structures, the principles of the church, have the ability, the courage, the tenacity to absorb the shocks and to be able to manage the problem, spiritually inclined. I gave all the background. And finally, I dropped the name. And the person was part of the executive council. And then I said,
At this time, the person didn't
he
know.
didn't know. He had no clue. My wife even didn't know. My wife is a senior reverend minister in church. She had no clue. And right there, I dropped the name that the man the Lord has placed upon my heart is the very Reverend Godwin de la Fiagome. And he was shocked. He had no clue. And all the executive members, everybody was looking at me. And it was like, okay, we thank God. We thank God. I mean, it was like for the first few minutes or seconds, it was a shock. People have no clue what I was going to. And then, of course, so I asked, any comments? And then, they all said, we thank God, we thank God. And finally, they subjected him to interview. He was vetted. He was literally vetted for about 2 hours to probably test his ability, because they said the shoe you are going to fill is a huge shoe.
one.
And how can you be, because they weren't too sure. So they vetted him for about 2 hours. There was also another moment we had a 3-hour meeting, and now that candidate had to be voted on by the executive council. So though I have nominated, though he has been vetted, then they have to subject him to vote. So he had a unanimous decision from the National Executive Council. So at this stage, he moved from Bishop S.N. Mensah's candidate to the National Executive Council candidate. Then the next level of authority, or the next layer of stakeholders, was the district superintendent ministers from the district and the region. They had a meeting, a 3-hour meeting, prayer meeting, and then we presented the candidate. So now, with a couple of NEC members, he was presented as the National Executive Council candidate. Remember, no more Bishop S.N. Mensah's candidate, but the National Executive candidate. And then he also had a unanimous vote. It was a secret ballot. So there was a unanimous agreement vote. Then he's no more the Executive Council. So he now became the National Executive Council and the District Superintendent and Area Ministers Ministries candidate. Then in November 26th, a General Council meeting was held. The General Council consisted of almost about 123 candidate delegates that came from the branches. They represented the branches in the regions. So these were some ordinary members, deacons, deaconesses, all pastors. They met in Tema. 1 123 or 128 or so. Then we presented the national executive and the district superintendent's candidate. They read his profile. They told them all the levels they have gone through, executive council from the executive to the district, and he was presented. Then there was a secret. We appointed a national elections board, an independent national elections board. They printed the ballot papers. It was stamped by full gospel stamp. They had a voting booth, 2 booths, and I started I did the first vote. Others started casting their votes, and this was managed by an independent electoral board by the church. We had a chairman.
Personally had no hand in
I
this
have no
at this
hand in
time.
it. So I was sitting down. They managed this, and then they started counting the ballots. They counted, and then they were able to tabulate everything, and they only showed me that they said, this is the results. Then they asked, do I have your permission to announce? So the chairman of the election board then announced the results. I didn't announce it. We were all watching and we were observing. And everything, there was transparency throughout the entire process. You see, you give ownership to the people. That is the principle. Give ownership to the people. When you give ownership, then that becomes stakeholders' satisfaction. People will be happy with the choice. So they went through the elections, and the result was that he pulled 96 votes. It was 113 yes, only 4 no.
The rest were yes.
The rest were yes. So it was 96% yes. It was an overwhelming endorsement. Then once that was done, we were glad and we thanked the Lord that what we started in 2019, from 2015 up to 2019, it narrowed to 3, and then by 2022, this is the candidate finally God has approved for through the people. Then November 26, 2001, he was inducted into office. No, he was inducted in 2022. February 26, as the 3rd president of Full Gospel Church International. And on that day, we had various professors from the theological institutions. Professor Samuel Jedu was there.
Okay.
Professor, Philip Lai of Kofi Christula was there. And all these gurus of the charismatic leaders, majority of them were there. He was inducted into office, and he took office as the 3rd generation, pastor or leader of FGCI. So that has been the story. There were 3 layers of authority that he was subjected to. It was to give ownership, it was to give legitimacy, it was to give authority so that people would be able to buy in. And during the induction, what I intentionally did was that I made all the pastors to rise up, and I asked them, are you ready to accept this man as your next leader and to submit to him and work with him to achieve the vision? They all said yes. Then we turned to the congregation. All FGCI members represented from the various branches, rise on your feet. This is your candidate. Are you ready to work with him as church members and to acknowledge him as your next leader? They said yes. Then we moved on. So you were trying to get the buy-in of the people. And today, he has taken off well, and I have no doubt he's going to do greater exploits.
Wow.
I have no doubt. And I'm there to provide him all the necessary support, give him the needed space to operate. Every Tuesday we have a prayer meeting by Zoom, and I decided that since we inducted him, 1st of March was when he took office. So 1st of March, I welcomed him to the staff. He had a meeting with the staff, and I introduced their new president, and he had a word with them. And immediately, you know what he did? He made them to sign an oath of secrecy.
Why did he do that?
No, an oath of secrecy, that is, that everything, he said, I'm not afraid of enemies coming from outside. But what we are scared of is enemies from within. And therefore, you need to be sure that if you are a member of the staff, you make sure that you keep information within and you respect the processes of the
So it was to instill the principle of loyalty.
Loyalty. He made them to sign oath of secrecy. Though they have signed it from the beginning of the year, because every year we sign the oath of secrecy. Every year. Every year, every staff would go through the oath. You will read it, you will sign.
I see.
Every year. And so, but he made them to sign. and then he worked with them. 2nd April, he's going to have what he called stakeholders engagement. All the various departments of the church, I think about 17 of them, from the executive council, national advisory board, ministry directors, deacons. Guess what? Every one of them is going to meet in Tema, and he's going to have an engagement with them. He's going to ask them, he has asked them to share their vision of what they want to do in their unit department. Number 2, they should also share with him what they are expecting from him. And then number 3, what they will do to move the church forward.
Okay.
And then they will put all that together. They will crystallize that as the next 5 years vision.
So with
that is going to
this,
work
it
with.
can be guaranteed that Full Gospel has a future.
Absolutely.
This issue of secession, Bishop, I know it's quite a sensitive area, but I would want to find out, is the principle deeply rooted in Scripture?
Yes. You see, if we look at Genesis chapter 1, there is a statement from Genesis chapter 1, verse 24 and 26. God said, let the earth bring forth, the living creatures according to its kind. Cattle and creeping things and the beasts of the earth, each according to its kind, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind. The cattle according to its kind. Everything that creeps upon the earth according to its kind, and it was so. Now, when you read the phrase according to its kind, it gives the expression of succession.
Okay.
Produce after your kind. In other words, anything that has life must produce after this kind. Anything that has life must produce the next generation. So, right from the book of Genesis, God was giving us a mental picture that when you come into resistance, your job, you don't exit without producing after your kind. So that gives us an impression of succession. Now, in John chapter 15, verse 6, Jesus said, you have not chosen me, I have chosen you. Go out there and produce forth fruit, and your fruit should abide. So he said with them the principle of bearing fruit. That is longevity, sustainability, continuity. That the organization of the church must see continuity, sustainability. And that is the concept of your fruit should abide. So these were the principles that we can look at. Now, going into the Bible patterns. Now, looking at the Bible patterns, in Genesis 14, they start with Abraham.
Yeah.
Abraham had Eliezer as his loyal staff member.
Yeah.
And in chapter 15, God came to him with all the blessings and the promises from chapter 12, chapter 13, and 14. But at chapter 15, Abraham was saying, Lord, I think it's enough now. You've given me all the wonderful promises, but I'm wondering, I don't have a successor from my own loins. The only person I have is Eliezer of Damascus. He's going to be my heir. I'm worried. I'm thinking about longevity. I'm thinking about legacy. And you've given me all these wonderful promises, but I don't have one from my own. And God said, you know what? Eliezer is not going to be your successor, but I'm going to give you someone who will come from your own loins. During this encounter, Eliezer had no clue what God was telling Abraham. Perhaps at that time, Eliezer knew that he was going to be the next person to take over the mantle of leadership from Abraham. Yet Eliezer didn't know that God had changed the order. So it moved from the concept of...
So the element of after its kind still plays out.
It plays out throughout.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
So Eliezer didn't know that it has shifted from longevity, to a new arrangement that God himself has established. So that was from Abraham. Then we see that in Moses. I called it the Moses effect. This was Moses to Joshua. And remember, God told Moses, let Joshua prepare him for leadership. And if you look at the Moses' era, it took 40 years of preparation. And that is the emphasis of grooming, training, development. So that prepared Joshua to be able to take the people of Israel from the promised land, from the wilderness to the promised land. So the Moses' effect was an institutionalized system of leadership succession.
So there's the Abrahamic pattern.
Yes.
there's the mosaic pattern.
Exactly.
Okay.
See? So in the mosaic pattern, which I described, the Moses effect, is to groom your candidate. Have enough time of grooming and development. And what God established was 40 years of grooming, 40 years of development. So Joshua,
Must it take that long?
no, you don't want to hand over to the next generation. You don't want to hand over to the novice if he has to sustain the vision. If he has to sustain the vision and the development of the organization. You know, training is very important and sustainability is very key. That is the essence of the succession plan. Okay? And so from Moses, then we moved on to the Joshua effect. Unfortunately, Joshua belonged to that school of thought that believed that, look, I don't need to look for a leader. Let me leave it to chance. Let me wait until I die. The system will take care of itself. The system will be able to develop a leader of its own.
Is it a correct thought pattern?
That is where now we can see the effect. So we see the effect of the Joshua pattern, which was the Joshua school of thought, was that leave it to chance, just allow the system to be able to emerge, develop a leader. And you know that in Joshua, in Judges 21 to 25, 2 times it was said, in those days when there was no king, everybody started doing what was right in his own eyes. It led to chaos, it led to confusion, it led to conflict, constant wars in the nation of Israel over the many years. That gave birth to the judges, the Deborah, the Gideon, the Samson, and what have you. The nation never had peace. That should tell you that if succession is not planned well, it will lead to chaos, conflict, confusion, disaster.
Loss of direction.
Exactly. So the Joshua school of thought is there to tell us that you don't leave leadership succession to chance. Be it a church, a company, an organization, even among political parties. Unfortunately, Pastor Tu, there is no set of grooming of political leadership. That is why most African countries, we find ourselves in the mess, because it is the one who insults the most popular is nominated as a presidential candidate.
Seen as vocal. So
That is the thing. So not necessarily a leader. Being in position does not make you a leader. So being vocal, being insulting, and being the most popular, we vote for the most popular, but we don't vote for the most competent. So, and the political system do not produce leaders. They produce the most popular. So we are in crisis, and because there are no system of grooming. Kwame Nkrumah, we all know as one of the greatest leaders Africa has ever experienced. But the Kwame Nkrumah leadership is just like the Joshua effect leadership. When Joshua failed to intentionally look for a replacement, we have seen in the records the chaos, the confusion. Look at the party Kwame Nkrumah left. That should tell you the price you pay if you refuse to groom and develop leaders.
and there's a rippling effect of this on the church today,
Exactly.
especially the charismatic church.
Yes. You see, because in the charismatic churches, in the 80s, it was not a big issue at all. Because during the 80s, all the founding leaders were in their late 20s to early 30s.
Yeah.
So succession was not on the table. Now, the founding leaders are in their 60s. So it has become an awakening effect. It's a root effect to wake them up and for them to realize that, hey, we are being confronted with a reality. Now, the most important thing for them now is what is going to happen when I'm gone? What is going to happen after my term of office? They are not only thinking about it, but their members are also concerned, because for almost 35 years, and for some of them 40 years, they have been in the forefront. But the question now is, what is going to happen when they are no more? So that has become an issue. Years back, that was no more an issue. But for now, it is an issue. And if they do not plan it well, we will experience the Joshua effect.
Is it too late to start?
It is not too late to start if they only realize the importance and the need for it.
I'm asking that because of the time effect. in your case,
Yeah.
7 years of searching for one man,
Yeah.
7 good years of just searching for one man and seeking God's approval that, okay, this is the person. You can go ahead with it. And even with that, look at the processes you outlined. That's serious scrutiny,
Yeah.
that he had to go through at various levels.
Yeah.
Now, with the situation that we have, especially with the charismatic Pentecostals, well, I would even say that with the Pentecostals, they seem to be seeing their way through, but more with the charismatics. You still think that time is a friend?
Time at this stage is no more a friend. They need to seriously put their home in order. Unfortunately, some of them don't think this way. They think about like that of Joshua, that perhaps I'm going to hold on to the
System
mantle.
will produce someone.
Exactly. I'm going to hold on till God calls me home. I'm going to hold on until I die. So some of them are just hoping that, some feel that, hey, whatever happens behind my back, the system will take care of itself.
Do we have history to learn from?
We do have history. But the question is, Bible has set up giving us history to learn from. Apart from Bible giving us history to learn from, we can learn from the mainline churches. That is one. We can learn from the established Pentecostal churches, the Church of Pentecost, the Apostolic Church, Christ Apostolic Church, Assemblies of. We can learn the various patterns of leadership succession from them. But the question is, if we are only ready, remember, there is no best pattern. You only find out what can be the best approach, because every church has its own culture. So you cannot import the culture of Presbyterian to that of ICGC or Lighthouse or whatever,
Action
because
Chapel.
each church has its own culture. So you can probably borrow the concepts and the principles from these various mainline churches and the Pentecostal churches, and then define your own culture, because your culture will play a critical role in the selection process. So if you decide that you will just like hook, line, and sinker, you just go in there, just grab that of the principles of maybe Presbyterian or Methodist, definitely you are going to ruin your organization. But you can learn from the various principles that they have and then be able to shape something like a hybrid. But as to when, now, you see, Jesus taught us one principle. When he came out from the Jordan River, remember John said, "Behold, this is the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Hear him." At this time, the only voice the people knew was the voice of John. So for John to endorse him was very critical if Jesus had to be accepted by the people, because the people didn't know him. So you need someone to launch you. And John did that. And the moment John did that, John had to take the backstage. So Jesus had to manage two successions. He had to manage from John himself to himself. And then Jesus had to also manage his exit also. And the Lord Jesus taught us how he managed his leadership transition from John to himself. And when he went through the 40 days of fasting and he came out, remember, he spent 40 days fasting and praying to do what? To select his disciples. The first person he went to select, was the fishing harbor in Luke chapter 5. And then he met this group. He didn't know the guys. They were fishing. I said, "Guys, do you have any food?" They said, "No, we don't. We've toiled all night. We caught nothing." He said, "Launch into the deep." And then when the man caught the fish, and it was so much, he fell down at Jesus' knee. He said, "Depart from me, I'm a sinful man." He said, Come on. From today, you are going to produce men. You know what Jesus was telling him? You were a fisherman, but I'm going to make you somebody great out of this situation. The very first days Jesus started his ministry, he looked for his replacement. That's the principle. The very first day Jesus started his ministry, he looked for his replacement. And the first person he
there's
called...
nothing like too early when it comes to succession.
No, the day you are inducted into office, you start looking for your replacement.
Wow.
The day you become a CEO in any company, start looking for your replacement. The day you become a leader in any department, start looking for who will take over from you. You don't wait until the last minute. And Jesus' principle has taught us, the day he started his ministry, the first person he chose was Peter, who was going to take over. He said, upon this I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. So you look for your replacement the very first day you start office. Unfortunately, in our leadership culture, when people take office, they want to strengthen their position, and immediately they start looking around who are the possible threats to his position. And his job is to remove them, get rid of them, either attack them, kill them, or remove them to a far remote area. You see, instead of rather looking for your replacement, we fight those people because we think they are a threat to us. And that is a wrong concept of leadership. And Jesus is rather teaching us that, listen, when you take office, you look for candidates who can do better. You see, because if your successor fails, you have failed. At this stage, all that I have done by the grace of God is not my success story. It's the success story of my father. So people tell me, oh, your dad, God bless your dad. He's done a great job. God bless your dad. They're not saying God bless you. They say, oh, Papa, you're there. Oh, the old man has done very well. It is the credit. All that we have built now is the success of the founder. What Bishop Dela is going to build will tell my success story. So if I don't seek his success, then I am ruining my own success. Because in the success of your successor lies your own success.
That's profound. Say that again.
In the success of your successor lies your own success. So it is in your own interest to ensure your successor becomes successful.
Bishop, let's talk about the trust factor. Don't you think that it's hard to find people you can trust? People you can trust. Oh, there's an emergency. I understand there's a fire outbreak 100 meters away from Joy FM in Kokomlemle. We kindly would ask the fire service to rush to the scene to avert loss of lives and property. This is coming to us right now. There's a fire outbreak just 100 meters away from Joy FM, the 355 Fanofa Street, Kokomlemle here. I will kindly ask the fire service to rush to the scene and avert any loss of lives and property. We pray we don't hear such news. Thank you very much. Right, Bishop, don't you think that is the trust factor that makes leaders pitch such position?
It is not only trust factor. It's a fear. It's an ego problem. Fear of losing prestige. Fear of losing power. It is a genuine fear. Fear of letting go all your investment, especially coming from the founding leaders. You know, when you start a church, you literally invest all your resources.
Everything into it.
Okay, my dad invested his gratuity. It was given to him when he left office, and he invested everything. And my mom approached him and said, "What are you doing?"
He poured everything into ministry.
Literally poured everything. His years of gratuity, he invested it into the church. And during those days, the church wasn't taking an offering, so he was financing everything. You know, and my mom said, "What are you doing? The children are young. They are in middle school and going to secondary school. How are you going to sustain them?" He said, "God is going to take care." So you see, founding leaders will invest their time, their effort, their resources. And so they are emotionally and economically and spiritually connected to the institution. But there must be a time where you have to draw the line that what belongs to the family and what belongs to the institution. And so the fear of the fact that if I let go of someone, my power, and I nominate someone, what is going to happen to me when I'm no more? What is going to happen to me in my old age? Who is going to care for my future? Who is going to take care of my children? So these are genuine fears. And we respect that.
And that's on the back of certain experiences. Because we've heard certain stories around where, I mean, leaders have handed over the baton to their successors and they've not been treated fairly at all.
Absolutely. That is why sometimes it's difficult for people to let go. Okay? But probably to help forestall that, you need to put in the structures, bylaws, well documented bylaws, that this is what will be done for the success, for your predecessor. This will be done for whoever you take over from. This will be done. His accommodation will be taken care of. Maybe hospitals, health issues, sustaining him in his family. There must be the package that must secure his future. Okay, even in our social life, we have programs and packages done for our former presidents, because when people have served at such higher office, they must go honorably and be sustained until they die. They must be well catered for. It's a dishonor, for example, for a former head of state to walk in town taking trotro and a taxi, or probably now looking for a job to be reemployed. It's a dishonor to the nation. It's a curse to the nation. The nation must take care of him until he dies. The nation must be responsible. It's done all over around the world.
And this applies to the church.
And this must apply to the church. This must apply to the church. So, but you see, if you do not have that in as part of your bylaws and rules and regulation, it can pose a challenge. And these are some of the genuine fears for which people are not ready to let go. So sometimes they have also been betrayed by successors. They have been betrayed by lawyer sons. So they are wondering, I mean, if at this stage I haven't handed over leadership and he's betraying me, what is going to happen when I hand over leadership to? So sometimes these are multiple factors. Okay, the factor of letting go of power, the factor of the fear of the unknown, the factor of betrayal, the factor of the fact that what is going to happen to him, how is he going to be catered for, his wife and children. These are genuine things that must be taken care of, and that is why sometimes it poses a challenge.
Right, it's just amazing how time flies. But let's read a couple of your messages. Today, we're setting the tone. This is such a sensitive subject. We can't use just an hour, in fact, less than an hour, to exhaust it. So we're setting the tone tonight. I'm very sure you've sent some messages. 055-1111-997 is the WhatsApp line. You can send your thoughts and your questions. Let's get to some messages on Facebook. Rex Ford Asante says, okay, more grace to you, Bishop, really learning. Okay, Vincent Kobina Roxon says, wow, great principle of succession from the creation story. Haven't thought of that. I haven't looked at that angle yet. Deep insight, Bishop. God bless you. All right, then we're getting a lot of God bless yous to Bishop. Pius Apre says, well, interesting issues there. It's interesting. I know you're deep in thought. Hello, greetings. I work with Jesus team. This man of God is real and spontaneous. Yes, that's true. You can't take that from Bishop. Good evening, man of God. Personally, I don't expect the mainstream churches to face problem with their succession plans because they already have structures in place to direct them as to what they need to do. The problem has to do with the modern day one-man charismatic churches. Well, I have my reservations about the expression of one-man. Every church is one-man church. Every church was begun by one man. Exactly. Okay, so you may have to come clear with what. Even Methodists. I mean, you mentioned Methodists, and you're talking about John Wesley. Okay, so every church, God begins the vision from one man. So you may have to come clear with what you mean by one man. I'm very sure that you mean the charismatic churches, right? Okay, I could also agree with the influence of the mosaic effect of leadership, but Joshua came up as a failure, though he had been groomed by Moses. The leadership of the children of Israel seems to be hovering among these three notable tribes: the Levites, the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Ephraim. This from Uncle Ben. Thanks very much for the submission, Uncle Ben. This one says, good evening, Uncle Ato. I am enjoying the conversation. Thanks to your guest. Insightful there. Ajiman Joseph sent this one. All right. This says that my name is Peter Ampiao from Tema. Great leader by all standards. Bishop S.N. Mensah. Congrats. All right. Thank you very much. Right. Some more messages on Facebook, and then I'll be taking Bishop's closing comments. Like I said early on, you set the tone tonight, and we're going to be building on the tone we've set. All right. Isaiah, is that okay? It's Issa rather. Issa Robert says, "I'm very proud of you, Daddy. God richly bless you." Okay, Bishop, it's been very educative tonight. I would want to take your closing comments, even as we have set the tone for this all important discussion, and then we can call it a night.
I would say that true leadership is about continuity. True leadership is about sustainability. True leadership is about finding your replacement whilst you are alive and seeing to it that that replacement is doing well and doing whatever you can to sustain him and to support him. My dad taught me, he handed over leadership 12 years or 10 years before he was called into glory. He sat down to see me work. He supported my dream. He encouraged me. And he asked me, do same. And I have handed over leadership. And by the grace of God, I will live to see how this great leader is going to take full gospel to the next level. You don't need to wait until you are bed-stricken. You don't need to wait until perhaps, you've died all of a sudden. You don't need to wait until last minute before you look for your replacement. Look for your replacement the day you take office. Whether you are a managing director, a medical doctor, a chief accountant, a chartered accountant, a leader, wherever you belong to, whether in politics, in business, in social life, the day you are sworn into office and you take office as a managing director, a general officer, start grooming people. Because whatever be the case, you will hit retirement and you will leave. But your greatest joy that you have produced sons and daughters like doctors. If you're a medical doctor, produce your sons and daughters. If you're a chief accountant, produce your sons and daughters
after your own kind.
After your own kind. Anything that has life must produce after its own kind.
Thank you very much. Bishop S.N. Mensah has been our guest. Right. Pentecost Hour is a religious broadcast program sponsored by the Church of Pentecost, and it comes your way every Monday at 9:30 p.m. right here on Joy 99.7 FM. You'll be hearing the voice of the chairman of the Church of Pentecost, Apostle Eric Nyamiche. Tune in, God willing, tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. and you are going to be blessed. You are going to be informed. You're going to be impacted. You're going to be transformed through the agency of the unadulterated Word of God. So tune in to Pentecost Hour every Monday at 9:30 p.m. Right. My name is Acquah, and this is where we draw down the curtains as far as tonight's edition of A Walk with Jesus is concerned. My guest has been the immediate past, in fact, the proud immediate past president of Full Gospel Church International, Bishop S.N. Mensah. Many thanks to Michaela for the production assistance, my very good friends and loved ones who tuned in tonight, my cherished listeners and viewers who tuned in tonight. God richly bless you. Tune in tomorrow for AOV at 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and then further joy time in his presence with Pastor Kujo Frimpong. Uncle Ken is up next with Jazz on Joy, and he's going to be treating you to some sweet tunes on Jazz on Joy. Uncle Ken, a very good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Pastor, I'm fine, thank you. I hope you're fine too.
Blessed by grace, blessed by grace. What are we to expect tonight on Jazz on Joy?
The usual delightful jazz music.
Wow.
To soothe people
True.
into tomorrow.
True,
Yeah.
True. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Enjoy your
too.
show, sir.
Thank you.
Right, so we're out.
Jesus said,